Hi, and welcome to episode 3 of Swim for Land. Hi everybody, my name is Tom Urey. This is the Swim for Land podcast, in which I speak to people who talk openly about mental health issues. This episode is a few weeks late because I've not been well. I got a quite serious lung infection, and that had the knock-on effect of giving my mental health a kicking. So I ended up suffering from depression again and really bad anxiety, all the kind of anxieties you can imagine that go with something like that at these times. So I think it's very poignant that my guest this week is Drew Linsalata, who wrote a book that has helped me an awful lot this year. It's called The Anxious Truth. And he talks about anxiety in a very practical, realistic and non-frightening way. And I found it very, I found it refreshing, and I found it a real comfort to know that what I was going through was a thing, and it was actually, it was a thing that had an end to it. So Drew talks in depth about what anxiety is, and a lot of it took me by surprise. A lot of it is not what I was expecting, but the guy knows his stuff, and we had a great chat a few weeks ago, and I'm delighted to bring it to you just now, especially because at the moment it is the holiday season, and it is the weirdest ass holiday season that I've ever experienced. I've been on my own this Christmas, but it's been fine because each day I've been feeling physically and mentally better. So without further ado, I'm going to take you back to the chat I had with Drew Linsalata. Drew, thank you for joining me. You're in New York?
I am in New York. I am on Long Island.
I love New York. I love New York.
25 miles east of New York City as the crow flies.
I've been 3 times. Round about 2004, 2005, I got obsessed and came over 3 times. And
come on back, man.
After 4 or 5 days, I just felt like a New Yorker. I felt like I was at home. It's very like Glasgow.
Yeah,
the people are like Glasgow, and it was built at the same time, so the street grid system is the same.
Yeah,
I think it's the only 2 cities in the world that have got that kind of thing. But that thing of starting a conversation with someone in the street happens in Glasgow, happens in New York.
I would think Glasgow must be so much older than New York. No, maybe not.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but the kind of industrial part of Glasgow, I think, was built up the same time as New York. And anyway, I'm not entirely sure. But listen, Drew, the reason why I wanted to get you on, this is a brand new podcast I'm doing about mental health, specifically for, I don't know, in Scotland, we've traditionally been quite kind of staid about talking about stuff like that. It's always like, nope, we're fine. Don't sweep it under the carpet, stiff upper lip, we'll get through this, we're okay. But I think that this year, because we've been locked up and because there's been a lot of people that have been maybe encountering mental health problems for the first time ever, I found that this summer when I became ill, talking to other people was the absolute key to getting identification. And I remember when I first discovered you and your forum and your book, I was having a terrible period with anxiety that had lasted 4 days, and it had followed a period of depression as well. And in that 4 days, I was so worked up that I couldn't even sit down. I was trying to find every podcast. I was trying to look, because I just couldn't make sense of why it wasn't stopping. And then someone on Facebook directed me to your the anxiety forum. What's it called? Have I got that right?
I didn't even remember what it's called. That anxiety forum. And I came on there, and I think I sent you a message, and you replied, right away. And you told me something that blew my mind. You told me to stop fighting
the anxiety and to stop fighting the panic and to let it happen. And I had never, ever thought of it that way. I'd always tried to slay the dragon.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, can you talk me through that method? Because it worked. I was able to sit down and have a cup of tea and go, after 2 days it had stopped. You know, what is that?
Yeah, I could talk you through it. It's so that is based on the notion that there's a couple of things we need to cover on that, and if you don't mind.
Okay.
So
yeah, go
there's
for it.
Difference between there's anxiety, and every human being experiences anxiety. We have stress in our lives, we have uncertainty, we have money, relationships, family, health, all that stuff, right? And sometimes we feel stress, anxiety, and that sort of stuff. That's never what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when anxiety becomes disordered, where you develop an actual anxiety disorder, and in that situation, the anxiety is what drives more anxiety. So like you were in that situation.
Yeah.
So I'm always talking about that. I'm not necessarily, look, a lot of the things I talk about can apply just to life in general, anxiety management, stress management. We're always talking about anxiety disorders where the anxiety itself, you are afraid of you having anxiety and you're afraid of having more anxiety. And that just feels the same. So we start from that premise, and then we go based on the premise that the anxiety disorder is not a body problem. There's nothing wrong with your body. Everything that it was doing is exactly what a couple of million years of natural selection
quite a lot wrong with my body, but carry on.
Well, okay, we don't judge, it's all good. But there's nothing wrong with your body. It's doing the panic response is a natural physiological response. It's designed in. It's just triggered at an inappropriate time. It doesn't need to be there at that moment. And we know that it's a cognitive problem because what happens is you start to interpret what your body is doing as danger. And then you're afraid of it. So when those sensations and feelings, you get jittery, your heart is racing, it's hard to breathe, you get a little dizzy, your legs are jelly, you're all amped up, that becomes a disaster. Whereas the majority of people in the world, if they feel that, they know I had a fight with my wife, or I'm having money problems, I'm stressed. For people with an anxiety disorder, when those things happen, they hit the panic button. Boom, they're already panicking. And then this is an emergency that I feel this way. I can't feel this way. This is terrible. This is dangerous. And so when we try to fight it and make it go away, we cannot, because your brain is having no part of that. We have to let it happen so that and I know this is so, a lot of people listening to me right now, like, this guy has no effing idea what he's talking about, right? They're like, no way, I'm not letting it happen. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
But we have decades, mountains of clinical evidence in the US, in Europe, all over the world. This is cognitive behavioral therapy and its variants. When you let it happen and you not fight it, it will end anyway. And then the fear center in your brain gets the experience that it needs to learn, I didn't have to try to stop it. It was never dangerous. It will end on its own. So when we try to stop it, we fight it, we avoid it, we fear it. We have to I have to have my essential oils. I have to have my lavender. I have to have my tea. I have to have my weighted blanket. I have to make it go away.
I got a weighted blanket. I got a weighted blanket this year, and I kept waking up thinking I was being attacked.
I'm not picking on the weighted blanket necessarily, but people will spend years with very complex rituals of safety and avoidance that involve things like essential oils and fans blowing on their faces and it covers weighted blankets, meds, supplements.
See, I like all that bullshit. I try, I'm surrounded by all that crap. I try everything. But this was the first thing that actually diffused it. What you said to me, it was like that. Whoa, that's mind blowing, and it's so simple.
Yeah, it's simple, but it's really hard to do. I will say that every day, all day long. The plan that I always talk about, I didn't invent it, by the way. I just happen to be good at explaining it, evidently. So what I'm talking about is super simple in concept. Like, stop fighting it. It will end on its own, and your brain will adapt and learn that you never had to be afraid to be anxious. But it's really hard to do, because when you are anxious and your fight or flight response is kicking in, sitting there and letting the worst thing happen, you think you're going to die, going to go crazy, going to have a heart attack, going to pass out. You have to just let that happen, and then it doesn't, and then you learn that it was never going to happen. But it's super hard to just sit there and let the train come and hit you. You're convinced the train is going to hit you. You have to let it, and then you learn there was no train.
That's what happened, because I'd had 4 days of it. I felt as if I had no other choice but to do what you'd suggested. Because I tried everything else. I tried all the bullshit. I tried all the essential oils and all the hypnosis stuff and all that stuff that wasn't taken seriously. And when you suggested that, it was frightening. Yeah, it's not what I wanted to do, but I went, I'm just going to fucking try it. I
What do I
can't,
got to lose?
you know, I'm just going to, what have I got to lose? Because I'm going to, you know, there's going to be a dragon break the door down and eat me anyway. So I might as well. And lo and behold, I started to feel better. And it was like, wow. And it was hard. I get that it's hard, but it was a revelation. And it's something I've used since. It's something I've used for the rest of this year.
Yeah.
Because it's not, every day I'm having these waves of, oh my God, I'm never going to work again. And
sure.
you know, I'm going to get COVID. I'm going to get, but then doing what you suggested, I just go, well, you know, it's
maybe, but I'll handle it. Like, in the end, right? So what's interesting about approaching your anxiety disorders this way is the lessons you learn when you do that are many. And we are learning to, first of all, we're unlearning the bad cognitive connections that got us into the disorder. We're doing that on a mechanical level. We're literally like leveraging the amazing power of your brain, because it's your brain that got you into that mess. Like it turned on itself accidentally, like a kid that learns the wrong lesson in math class, you know, and then the teacher has to correct them. So we're correcting those bad habits and those bad links that have been made. That's true. But we're also learning the art of distress tolerance and navigating distress, uncertainty, fear, the unknown. We get good at navigating those things. So when the thought comes in your head, like, oh my God, what if I get COVID? It used to be like just the mere thought would hit the panic button. You wouldn't know what to do. But when you learn these lessons, you begin to be able to manage that and say things like, well, I might get it. It's true. I can't say that I won't. And if I do, I'll deal with it then. And that's true too. You'll figure it out. You're still here.
Yeah, I know. And it doesn't exist at the moment because it's the future or possibly not.
Well, there's a lot of that in there too. And there's a lot of mindfulness and living in the now, all of that stuff.
Yeah. So Drew, listen, so did you used to suffer from this? Did you used to suffer from anxiety?
I did. So I think I started both of my books with "I Was You," and that's in my. I think it's in my.
I'm reading it just now. Yeah,
I Was You. I did. My first panic attack was in 1986, and they went all the way through. I suffered at 3 times in my life, different levels of that, but all the way through to about 2008. Long time. Well, not continuously. There was 3 specific periods in my first book I wrote. I walked through the whole thing. Yeah, like that was a long time to have to deal with that problem. But yes, I was agoraphobic. I was crippled with panic. I was crippled by irrational and obsessive thoughts about death and existence and dying, and have crazy thoughts like I don't want to be the first person to drink out of the orange juice container in case it was poisoned. Yeah. So I'll just let other people in the house die. Like there's no rationality to it, you know, like I would think that, like, how horrible is that? Like I'm not the worst person in the world, but I had all of that. Couldn't leave the house, didn't want to leave the house, was afraid to go to my own office. I owned the business and I wouldn't go to it. How's that? Couldn't take my kids places. Like I was there.
I get it.
There was nothing that anybody listening could tell me that you're afraid of that I would not understand, because I was afraid of it too.
I got quite agoraphobic a few years ago. I'm 250 pounds lighter than I used to be now.
Yeah,
so I know. Yeah. And I used to be in used to be in a soap opera, and I played this character called Big Bob, and he was that size. Yeah. So there was no hiding. I couldn't put on a baseball cap and be. And so if people saw me coming down the street, it was, well, there he is. And it became so that I didn't want to leave the house because of that, because someone always had something to say about my weight or, you know. And now I think the thing that I'm a little bit concerned about now is that because we're in lockdown again, and we have been for quite a while, I'm getting really, really used to being in the house again. And I'm now thinking it's going to be like an astronaut re-entering the Earth's atmosphere when we go back to normal after we get this vaccine. And well, that's one of the things that I am concerned about at the moment, is that I'm becoming a little bit agoraphobic again. Yeah,
many people are, though. So in the community that surrounds the podcast, are you familiar? You're familiar with the Facebook group and everything, but it's a very vibrant community. That's a common concern since March, since this all happened in the West. You know, like, well, the people who are making really good progress with their panic disorder, especially with their agoraphobia, and they're worried, like, I can't really get out now, so I think I'm going to go backwards. But you won't. Like, what you'll find is, and what I tell people all the time, you can't unlearn what you've learned. So once you know how to handle it, you may get back to a place where, like, leaving the house is difficult again, but you'll progress through that so much faster. than when you first solve the problem. Much faster. That memory kicks in. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. We do this.
Well, I did it yesterday. I've got a WhatsApp group of friends that we all decided to get out. So yesterday I walked 3 miles yesterday morning. Good. With other people doing it at the same time in different parts of Scotland. And we're doing that. I didn't do it this morning because I've been doing these podcasts all day, but we're doing it every day. And I felt okay after the initial get out of the house and get into the street. It was fine. You know, it wasn't as, it was just breaking the seal and getting back out there.
Yeah.
And just trying to kind of, but I think the social interaction side of it, I'm going to have to relearn how to walk again. With
it's crazy, right? Yeah. It comes back though. But
everyone's feeling it.
Everybody's feeling it. Whether there's an anxiety problem or not, everybody's feeling it. The isolation, the lack of interaction. I mean, look, it's fueling here in the US, it's fueling a resurgence. You know, we're in not good shape COVID wise here. It's where the whole country is red. And some of that is kind of pandemic fatigue. People are tired of being isolated. I understand that. I really do.
Here.
Very
exactly
difficult.
the same thing going on here. Exactly
very
the same
difficult.
thing going on.
Yeah. Yeah. We're social creatures. We kind of need each other, you know?
Yeah. But also there's people thinking it's not real as well, which is just.
Well, we can talk about that too, but we have that too. I know. Yeah. That doesn't blow me away, but okay. Like, you know, but at a minimum.
So listen.
Yeah.
So Drew, when you were suffering from this kind of stuff back and you were having these panic attacks back in 2008 and whatever, what was the thing that what did you discover? Who taught you? Who was your Drew?
So the first time I ever had a panic attack, 1986. So I'm not a whippersnapper. I'm not a kid. I didn't know what it was. You know, I did not. And even now in 2020, many people have never heard. They don't know what it is. We don't talk about that stuff. We don't teach it here in the US. We don't tell everybody about mental health and anxiety disorders. We never talk about it. So I didn't know what it was. I got completely lost, had no idea what was wrong with me. I was panic disorder left unchecked will lead to agoraphobia. Like agoraphobia is not its own special kind of anxiety. It's just avoidance to the max. And I was heading right down that line, you know, down the road. I was becoming textbook progression from panic attacks to panic disorder to agoraphobia. And my Drew was an Australian physician named Dr. Claire Weeks, who unfortunately passed many years ago, but she wrote for the layman on these disorders back in the 50s and 60s, 1950s and 1960s. Absolutely groundbreaking. So she wrote a book called Hope and Help for Your Nerves, which to me, if there is no Claire Weeks, then my books don't exist. People like me on social media and with podcasts don't exist. Like everything I say, I have learned from her. I built on it. You know, we have the benefit of now the internet and knowing more and more research and stuff. But Claire Weeks was the one who taught me. And she was already gone when I read her books. I had a psychologist locally here in New York who handed me her book, said, read this. And I went home, read the whole book, not a big book. It took me a couple hours, read the book, read it again, that took off from work, read it again the next day, the whole thing. And it was like, oh, that's what this is. And I thought I knew. And so therefore I kind of ran over it and I fixed it, or I thought I did. And then 10 years later, it came back again and I forgot to do all the Claire Weeks stuff. And I medicated it for 10 years and I could understand the weight. I was 100 pounds heavier than I am now.
Right.
You see me at like 215. Yeah. I was way close to 315 pounds at one point, part of the antidepressants. That didn't turn out well. It was 10 years of my life I wish I had back. I came off the medication and the disorder was still there because the meds don't fix it. It just masks it. And then I had to go through the process. I knew what to do. I read the Claire Weeks book and I have an undergraduate minor in behavioral psychology that qualifies me to do nothing. I could run the coffee machine at Starbucks, literally. But I've always been an absolute behavioral sciences nerd. I'm the dude that actually reads the research papers, not the abstracts. I like to read the papers. I'm a total nerd for cognition and learning theory and all that stuff. So I knew what to do.
That's why I'm glad. That's why I'm glad there are people like you to interpret it for people like me, because I don't know
why I love it so much.
I don't have the attention span to be able to do that. Because I remember my first panic attack was in a record store out of the blue. I hadn't been worried about anything, but I just felt as if I was having a heart attack. So I got out of the record store. There was a cop car outside. I jumped in it and I said, I'm having a heart attack. And they got the sirens on and rushed me to hospital. I got into accident and emergency and they immediately just went, panic attack.
Yeah, they look at you.
No, panic. Here's a paper bag. and then they explained it, and I went, but that felt like a heart attack. It felt like I was going to die all of a sudden. And they said, nah, it's a panic. I said, but I wasn't worried about anything. They said, yeah, but the build up of stuff, and it's not looking after yourself. And it's, I was drinking heavily at the time. And I think it just grabbed me. And there's been a few since, there was one, the last one really was a couple of years ago when I was doing a stage show, and I had one just before they had to hold the show.
Wow. Okay.
Because I was in my, and luckily the stage manager had experience of dealing with anxiety and stuff. So it was okay. But I think that one of the reasons why I want to start this podcast, Drew, is because there's misinformation, or there's a lack of information for people who have never come across this. So you get a Glasgow man who just goes to his work and has never talked about his feelings and has never dealt with depression or anxiety and might not know what it is. So they might be going, I am having a heart attack, or I am wanting to kill myself and I don't understand why. So I'm trying to open up a dialogue about it. So I'm talking to people that know what they're talking about, because I don't.
Well, I think that is a very, and I'll support that any way I can, because I would agree. I mean, we could talk about stigma. There's certainly stigma about mental health here in the States too, same as it is over there. It's getting better. People are more likely to talk about it openly. And I will, as much as there's a lot of evils of social media, that's been one good thing. It gives people an opportunity to talk about this sort of stuff, which is nice. But what I find in the case of anxiety disorders, especially, is that the most prevalent advice is often the worst advice. So it is so easy to go on the internet and ask, like, well, what do you do about your anxiety, and get buried in dietary changes and yoga and workouts and gratitude journals. And, and again, if you're just dealing with the general angst of life, love it. Like, I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge exercise fan. I love to lift and cardio. Like, I be healthy, eat well, do all of those things. Do yoga. It's awesome. Yoga is awesome. Meditate. I'm a huge, huge meditation fan. But
Me too.
But we get bad advice. The advice is, write a gratitude chart. It's really difficult to tell an agoraphobic that cannot get out of their house to pick their kids up from school to start gratitude journaling. Like, that is, I'm not saying that that gratitude is wrong. We should all understand, we should all have, the practice of gratitude in our life, but that ain't going to solve an anxiety disorder. So the most prevalent advice for mental health that I have found is often the worst advice. It's the easiest to digest because it doesn't require you to do anything hard. It just requires you to do things that seem like they're feel-good things.
Yeah.
The answer, at least in the issues that I address, kind of has nothing to do with feel-good things. You got to do hard and scary things before you begin to feel good. No one wants to hear that. So
I want to hear it because that is what that was the road to Damascus moment for me in the summer when I went, the thing that I least wanted to do is the thing that worked.
Yes.
So what you'd suggested was just panic, just sit there and just let it happen, and then it will pass quicker than. And I didn't understand that it was a fire feeding a fire every time I tried to fight it, and it was getting tighter.
Completely.
So I'm now like, right, well, bring it on. I'll do whatever it takes.
Everything changes, right? Again. When you're not afraid of it anymore, that's when the disorder is done. When you are and people look at me when I say that, believe me, I get my share of heat over that. I've been told, you've clearly never had a panic attack. You don't know what you're talking about. This is ridiculous. Shut up. I've heard all of that. I hear it on the daily. But in the end, well, what do you mean? Like, do you still have anxiety? Like, yeah, sometimes I have anxiety. Like, I'm human. I can have that too. Well, then you're clearly not recovered. No, the difference is I'm not afraid. So I could be having a panic attack right now. And I have had panic attacks on camera in my podcast and some of my YouTube videos. And if I didn't say I was, no one would have known. Because I simply do not care if I have one or not ever again. If I do, okay, it's over in 10 minutes. It's an annoyance. And that is when you know the disorder is fixed. Now you no longer have an anxiety disorder. And that's a tough one to get to because people don't want to do scary things. They don't want to face the thing that they're afraid of. Even if facing them teaches that they don't have to be afraid of it. It's tough, but it's simple, but there's so much resistance to it. People would much rather hear about a weighted blanket or gratitude journaling or breathing, grounding, lavender oil. They would much rather hear that. And I understand that. I do, but
I wish you could see my house. It has got weighted blankets. I've got crystals. I've got smudge sticks. I've got lavender oils. I've got every fucking book that they're all unread. You know, I've read the back jacket of them all. And then there's a gratitude journal through there that's got the first page written in, and then that's it. You know, I tried all that. Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, I'm grateful for my TV and my guitar.
They're hard discussions to have too, because the other thing we talk about a little bit, if you want to, is kind of root cause. That's another popular thing. You got another root cause. People ask me all the time, like, you clearly cannot be recovered, because they'll say, well, what caused your first panic attack? I don't know. I may never know. One day I may know. That's possible, but I may never know. But it doesn't mean that I have an anxiety disorder anymore. So one of the things that people also spend their time doing is they spend a huge amount of time, because this is what we think of as traditional therapy, right? If 5 years ago I said to you, tell me what therapy is, you would say, oh, I go in and I talk to a counselor, and she asks me how I'm doing, and we talk about what's bothering me. That's what everybody knows, right? But that's not the therapy that fixes an anxiety disorder. We know this. This is not even a question anymore. Yet that's what people will go to, and they labor under the assumption that I must find some sort of hidden root cause that's causing this anxiety. But what you have to understand with an anxiety disorder is maybe there was a root cause. And if there's trauma, there's abuse, there's that sort of stuff, you do have to deal with that. You really do. You can't just sweep it under the rug. But consider the anxiety disorder as a fire. So what you light a match, and now you light this fire. You have panic disorder, you have OCD, you have social anxiety, health anxiety, panic disorder, agoraphobia, you have all those things. You light the fire with the match. Then you take the match was the root cause, right? Now you take the match and blow it out. The fire is still burning. You blew out the root cause, but the fire, you can't blow out a fire with the match by killing the match you lit it with. So what people forget, they don't understand the part where the anxiety fuels itself after a while, and it disconnects from the original root cause. So I've had many, many people over the years who will have epiphany after epiphany. Oh, my mother, yes, my father, yes, there was this, there was that. Those are all good things to have. You need those epiphanies in life. But then they're like, I don't understand. I still have a hard time driving on the highway. Because the root cause isn't what makes you afraid of your own heartbeat.
So listen, Drew, if somebody is watching this and is maybe hearing things for the first time about anxiety, what is your best advice to somebody who maybe has got this kind of stuff? Where do they go? Because as you said, it is a minefield of information out there. What is the truth? What can people do?
Yeah, I think the best advice I could give you is to understand what it is you have first and foremost. So if you are just feeling anxious over life, that's one thing. But if you find that your anxiety is beginning to inform your lifestyle decisions, I'm beginning to avoid things, I'm beginning to avoid certain foods, places, going out, I can't talk to certain people, I can't do certain things. Well, you're heading toward an anxiety disorder where you're afraid of how you feel and what you think. And when you start to have those issues, you need to start to look toward cognitive behavioral solutions. Yeah. So, certainly they're welcome to hit my website and start to listen to the podcast. That's all free. That's 5 years. Most of my stuff is free, really. It's 5 years.
Where do we get that, Drew? Because I'll put it up on the screen behind me.
Yeah, you can just go to theanxioustruth.com. Start listening to the podcast. So it's 5 years worth of free podcast that will explain what this is.
Okay.
And look in that direction, because that is the most effective treatment for it. I hate to see people flounder. Go toward a cognitive behavioral with a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, not your MD. Get checked out, make sure you're healthy. But when the doctor says you're healthy, you're healthy.
What's the difference? What's the difference?
Oh, a lot of people don't know the difference. So here in the States, okay, which is fair. And that always blows me away too. People don't know the difference. The difference in the United States, at least, I can't say what it is. And I think it's the same for you guys in the NHS. I'm not sure. But a psychiatrist is an MD. So a psychiatrist went to medical school, was a doctor, just like a gastroenterologist is. And the psychiatrist back in the day, people think that psychiatry is therapy. And when psychiatry was born back in Sigmund Freud's days, it kind of was therapy. But once we hit the 1950s and 1960s, psychiatry became like the weak sister of medicine, and hey, we need to show that we're doctors too. So let's start looking at the brain and brain chemistry and pretending that we know more than we do. And now we have these drugs, and these are awesome until you find out that they have side effects and it doesn't always work. And they're playing whack-a-mole with meds and symptoms with you. So look, I clearly, I don't have a healthy view of psychiatry. I will admit that. I'm a little bit biased against that. But a psychiatrist is most likely, not in all cases, to want to solve your problem with a prescription.
Okay.
They will treat you like a doctor does. They're an MD. A psychologist is not an MD. A psychologist is going to treat you this is important, the right psychologist is going to want to treat you cognitive behaviorally, which is an active therapy where you are actively doing things. You're doing exposure work. You're facing your fear. There are exercises to do. There's homework. It's hard work. Other psychologists will want to just talk to you. Not terribly effective to solve these problems, but that's the difference. There's no medication involved, and they're treating with therapy, not with a physical intervention like medication, that sort of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah. God, yeah. Wow. Drew, listen, thank you so much for doing this. That's very so cool. And I will direct people to your online forum on Facebook, because it's really helped me. And what I do like, what I love about it, and I don't know how you find the time, is that 9 times out of 10, if somebody posts up a question, you're there within an hour answering it. You know, you're really involved.
Well, I have a great team of admins that help out in the group for sure. I couldn't do it without those guys. A lot of people want to talk to me directly. I would love to. I just wouldn't. I'd get up in the morning and 18 hours later still be doing direct messages. But if you're on the Facebook group, you can interact with me, and I get that all the time. Like, oh my God, you're the guy that wrote the book. You're answering me. Like, yeah, what's the big deal? I'm just a dude. So like, I'll answer you. But so that's where I am most active. If you want to actually ask me questions and interact, hop over there.
Fantastic. Drew, I think we need a part 2 with this maybe next year. Would you be
anytime, my friend, whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thank you, buddy.
Very welcome.
Linsalata.
Yeah, you got it. Nice job for Scott.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Stay in touch. Stay in touch.
You too.
Thanks for that, Drew. Genuinely, have a look at Drew's book. It's no nonsense. It's fun. If you can imagine anxiety as being fun, but it speaks to what I go through, and it helped me a lot. So please check it out. Thank you very much this episode to RHA Headphones, who are my sponsors and who make my favorite ever headphones. These sound incredible. And next week's guest, I'm delighted to say, is my very, very good pal, writer, broadcaster, author, producer, the one and only Ashley Storey. So until then, stay safe and keep the heat.